Have you ever felt cornered, out of options, with fear closing in, and the only way out was to be strong? Stay with me through this story and see how it ends. Hürtgen Forest, Germany, December 18th, 1944. Staff Sergeant Michael Carver pressed his back against frozen oak bark and counted his breaths. Somewhere below the ridge, 50 Wehrmacht soldiers were moving through the valley in loose columns, their voices carrying up through pine branches stripped bare by artillery. His unit, what remained of Charlie Company, 2nd Battalion, 8th Infantry, was dug in 300 yards behind him with 19 men, half of them walking wounded. None of them knew the Germans were coming. Are you enjoying the story? Click the subscribe button and help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. The spotter lay 15 feet to his left, face down in snow turned pink. A single round had caught him in the throat during their recon 2 hours earlier. Carver had dragged him into cover, but the man was gone before they reached the tree line. Now the M1C Garand rested across Carver's thighs, scope fogged at the edges, and he had 87 rounds in stripper clips pressed against his ribs beneath his field jacket. His right shoulder ached where shrapnel had torn through it outside Aachen in October. The stitches had held, but the joint went stiff and cold like this. He wiped the scope lens with a strip of undershirt and glassed the valley. The German column had stopped near a burned-out Kübelwagen. Soldiers gathering in clusters of 5 or 6, rifles slung, smoking. Officers at the front. No heavy weapons visible yet, but a half-track sat idling 300 yards east, its engine cough audible even at this distance. Carver's breath misted the air. Temperature had dropped to maybe 10 degrees. Wind gusted from the east, enough to push a .30-06 round 2 inches at 400 yards. Are you enjoying the story? Comment below which city you're listening from, and what's the best coffee to drink while listening. He pulled the rifle tight to his shoulder and felt the old wound pull. The Germans were moving again, spreading into a skirmish line. Carver counted heads, 48, 52. Hard to be sure with the trees and the fading light. They were heading straight for the draw that led up to Charlie Company's position. The radio on the dead spotter's belt crackled once, then went silent. Carver had tried it 20 minutes ago. Nothing but static. Battalion was 7 miles northeast, and even if he could reach them, air support wouldn't arrive before dark, which left him on a ridgeline with a scoped Garand, a dead man for company, and a choice that felt like swallowing glass. He could fall back, warn the company, give them 10 minutes, maybe 15 to pull out before the Germans overran their foxholes. But retreat meant leaving the ridge, and the ridge controlled the draw. Without suppressing fire from high ground, Charlie Company would be caught in the open or pinned in their holes. Either way, they'd be torn apart. Are you enjoying the story? Click the subscribe button and help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Or he could stay. Carver adjusted the scope and centered the reticle on a German sergeant near the front of the column, a tall man gesturing with one hand, weapon loose in the other. 420 yards, give or take. The sergeant turned his head, exhaling smoke, and Carver's finger rested on the trigger guard. Not yet. He needed them closer. Needed them committed to the draw where the trees narrowed and their numbers would jam them into a kill zone. Needed them to believe they were safe. He thought about the letter folded in his breast pocket, the one his wife had sent 3 weeks ago. She'd written about their son's birthday, about the snow in Pennsylvania, about how she prayed every night that he'd come home. He hadn't answered it yet, kept meaning to, kept finding reasons not to. The Germans reached the base of the draw and began moving uphill in 2 staggered columns. Carver counted again. 54. Officers in the center now trying to keep formation as the ground rose and the trees closed in. They were 400 yards out. Then 380, 360. The half-track growled somewhere behind them, still out of sight but getting louder. Carver's hands were steady. That surprised him. He'd been shaking an hour ago, crouched over the spotter's body, trying to stop blood that wouldn't stop. But now, with the rifle up and the Germans coming, his hands were stone. He picked his first target, an Obergefreiter near the left flank, carrying an MP40 and moving like he owned the ground. Carver led him 6 inches, exhaled halfway and squeezed. The Garand kicked. The German dropped. For a second, nothing happened. The column kept moving, men talking, boots crunching snow. Then someone shouted. The line collapsed inward, soldiers diving for cover behind trees and rocks, weapons coming up fast. Carver worked the bolt, ejected the spent casing, and fired again. A Feldwebel trying to rally his squad went down, clutching his chest. Third shot took a rifleman in the shoulder as he turned to run. The valley erupted. Muzzle flashes sparked from behind tree trunks as the Germans returned fire, rounds snapping through branches above Carver's head and punching into bark. He rolled left, low-crawled 8 feet, came up behind a fallen log, and fired twice more. One miss. One hit sent a mass on a soldier trying to flank uphill. They couldn't see him. Not yet. The ridge was too far, the light too dim, and they were panicking. Carver reloaded, thumbs working the clip into the receiver, and counted seconds. The half-track engine revved louder, gears grinding as it pushed forward. He glassed the drawer and found it. Nosing around a bend 200 yards below, turret-mounted MG-42 sweeping side to side. Carver shifted aim and put 2 rounds through the driver's viewport. The half-track lurched, veered left, and slammed into a pine with enough force to crack the trunk. The gunner behind the MG-42 scrambled out, and Carver dropped him before his boots hit the ground. The Germans were pulling back now, dragging wounded, voices tight with fear. Carver shot the man giving orders, then the one trying to establish a firing line, then another who broke cover too soon. His shoulder screamed every time the rifle bucked, but he kept shooting, kept them pinned, kept them dying. At some point he stopped counting rounds and started counting bodies. 11 down, 14, 18. The rest were falling back toward the valley floor, moving fast, discipline gone. A few tried to return fire, aiming blind toward the ridge, but Carver had already shifted position again, crawling through snow and deadfall, setting up behind new cover before they could fix his location. The Germans broke. 20-some men running south through the trees, dragging 3 wounded, leaving the rest. The half-track sat smoking against the shattered pine. Driver slumped over the wheel. Carver watched through the scope until the last German disappeared into the forest, then lowered the rifle and leaned back against the log. His shoulder was bleeding again. Not much, just enough to soak through the dressing and darken his jacket sleeve. He pressed a hand against it and looked at the sky. Daylight was almost gone, stars coming out. Somewhere behind him, Charlie Company was still dug in, still breathing, still alive, because 54 Germans had walked into a drawer and never made it out. Carver pulled the letter from his pocket. The paper was stiff with cold. He unfolded it slowly, careful not to tear the creases, and read his wife's handwriting in the failing light. She'd underlined a single sentence near the end. "Come home to us." He folded the letter and put it back. Then he reloaded the Garand, checked the scope, and started down the ridge toward his unit. The Germans would regroup, send more men. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. But that was tomorrow's problem. For now, 19 men were breathing in frozen foxholes because one man with a rifle had decided not to run. Carver moved through the trees, rifle across his chest, and behind him the valley was silent except for the wind. Are you enjoying the story? Comment below which city you're listening from, and what's the best coffee to drink while listening. Carver reached Charlie Company's perimeter 40 minutes after dark. The first sentry nearly shot him. A private from Kentucky, 18 years old, shaking so hard his rifle barrel wavered like a compass needle. Carver gave the password, and the kid lowered his weapon, eyes wide. "Sergeant, we heard shooting. Thought you were..." "Get Lieutenant Hayes." The private disappeared into the darkness. Carver dropped into the nearest foxhole and set the Garand across his lap. His shoulder had stopped bleeding, but the pain had spread down his arm, a deep ache that made his fingers clumsy. He flexed them, watching tendons work beneath torn gloves. Hayes appeared 5 minutes later, a thin man with a week's beard, and eyes that had stopped sleeping somewhere around Normandy. He slid into the hole beside Carver and waited. Germans. Carver said. 50 plus. They were moving up the draw in column. I stopped them. Hayes stared at him. You stopped them? Yes, sir. How many did you? 18 confirmed. Maybe 20. The rest broke south. Hayes was quiet for a long time. Then he pulled out a canteen, took a drink and passed it over. The water tasted like metal and iodine. Carver drank anyway. They'll come back, Hayes said. Yes, sir. How long do we have? Carver thought about the German officers he'd seen through the scope. The way they'd moved. The discipline before it shattered. They'll need to regroup. Call up reinforcements. Dawn, maybe. Could be sooner. Hayes nodded slowly. He looked at the men in the surrounding holes. Boys with frozen feet and 1,000-yard stares, holding rifles like lifelines. 19 left out of a company that had crossed the Belgian border with 142. The math didn't get better from here. Battalion won't pull us out, Hayes said. Not tonight. No, sir. So we hold. Yes, sir. Hayes climbed out of the hole and moved down the line, talking to each man, checking ammunition, adjusting fields of fire. Carver watched him go, then leaned back and closed his eyes. Just for a minute. Just to rest. He woke to the sound of engines. The sky was still dark, but dawn was close, that gray hour before light when everything looks like it's made of ash. Carver grabbed the Garand and crawled to the edge of his hole. Down in the valley, headlights cut through morning fog. 2 half-tracks. Maybe 3. And behind them, the shuffle and clink of infantry on the move. Hayes was already up, moving position to position, getting men ready. No one spoke. They'd all heard the engines. All knew what was coming. Carver pulled himself out of the hole and moved to the same fallen log he'd used yesterday, 30 yards forward of the main line. Better field of fire. Better angle into the draw. Hayes saw him go but didn't stop him. The Germans came up the draw in force this time. No loose columns, no casual smoking. They moved in bounds, one element covering while another advanced, textbook infantry tactics. Carver counted 80 men, maybe more. The half-track stayed back, engines idling, waiting for the infantry to clear the approach. 400 yards, 380, 360. Carver picked his target, an under-officer directing fire teams into position, and waited for Hayes to open up. The Germans were almost in range of Charlie Company's rifles when the lieutenant fired the first shot. Then the whole line erupted, 19 rifles pouring fire down into the draw. The Germans hit the ground and started shooting back. Carver worked the Garand methodically, breathing between shots, picking off anyone who tried to rally or maneuver. A squad leader. A machine gunner setting up his MG-34, an officer with binoculars. The shoulder screamed, but he kept shooting. The half-tracks pushed forward, turret guns raking the American line. Carver shifted aim and put 3 rounds into the lead vehicle's engine block. It coughed black smoke and stopped rolling. The second half-track kept coming, its MG-42 chewing up earth and wood, and Carver couldn't get a clean shot through the armor. Then someone from Charlie Company, the Kentucky private, Carver thought, stood up with a bazooka and fired. The rocket streaked down into the draw and hit the half-track broadside. The explosion flipped it onto its side, ammunition cooking off in secondary bursts that lit the fog orange. The German attack stalled. Men were dying faster than they could advance, bodies piling up in the same kill zone where Carver had stopped them yesterday. The ones still alive tried to fall back, but Charlie Company kept shooting, and Carver kept shooting, and the draw became a graveyard. It ended the way these things always ended. The Germans pulled back, leaving their dead, and the Americans stayed in their holes and waited to see if more would come. None did. By noon, Battalion finally pushed through with armor and relieved Charlie Company. By nightfall, Carver was on a truck heading west toward a field hospital, his shoulder wrapped in fresh bandages that were already soaking through. Hayes had written him up for a Silver Star. Carver didn't remember much of the conversation, just the lieutenant's hand on his good shoulder and something about valor. The truck hit a rut, and pain spiked through Carver's chest. He looked out at the passing forest, black trees against gray sky, and thought about the German sergeant he'd shot first. The tall one who'd been smoking. Carver wondered if that man had a wife, a son, a letter in his pocket that he'd never answered. The truck rolled on through the frozen countryside, and Carver closed his eyes and didn't open them again until they reached the hospital. When the doctors asked him how he felt, he told them fine. When they asked him what happened, he said he'd done his job. When they asked if he needed anything, he said no. But that night, alone in a tent with 20 other wounded men, he finally pulled out his wife's letter and read it again by candlelight. The paper was creased and stained, and some of the words were smudged, but her handwriting was still clear. "Come home to us." Carver folded the letter carefully and held it against his chest. Outside, snow was falling again, covering the roads and the fields and the forests where men had died because other men had decided they should. He thought about the draw, about the bodies, about 19 soldiers who were still breathing because he'd made a choice on a frozen ridge and lived with what came after. He thought about all of it until thinking hurt worse than his shoulder. Then he closed his eyes and tried to sleep. 3 months later, Staff Sergeant Michael Carver stepped off a train in Pennsylvania and saw his wife standing on the platform with their son. The boy was 5 years old and didn't recognize him at first. Carver knelt down slowly, favoring his right side, and waited until the child's eyes went wide with recognition. His wife didn't ask about the war. Not that day. Not for a long time after. She'd seen enough returning soldiers to know that some questions didn't have answers, and some answers were better left in the forests where they belonged. They walked home through streets lined with melting snow, and Carver carried his son on his good shoulder, and for the first time since Hürtgen, he felt like maybe the math could balance after all. Not the bodies, not the blood. Those numbers never balanced. But the cost of staying on that ridge versus the cost of running. Maybe that equation had a solution he could live with. Thanks for watching until the end. Comment below what city you're from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That night, after his son was asleep and his wife had gone to bed, Carver sat alone at the kitchen table and wrote a letter he would never send. He addressed it to the German sergeant, the tall one who'd been smoking, and he wrote about choices and consequences and the weight of staying when running would have been easier. He wrote until his hand cramped and the candle burned low. Then he folded the letter, walked outside, and burned it in the snow. The paper curled and blackened, and the words disappeared into ash and smoke. And Carver watched until there was nothing left but wind and darkness and the distant sound of a train whistle cutting through the Pennsylvania night. He went inside and closed the door and didn't look back. Thanks for watching until the end. Comment below what city you're from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.